gentlemen, and greetings to our chairman, Mr. Paupi, Ms. Katrina, our moderator from Amnesty International Malaysia, Mr. Thomas Albrecht, representative of UNHCR Malaysia, Mr. YB Charles Santiago, chairman of SPAN and former MP of Klang, Mr. Adrian Pereira, ED and co-founder of North-South Initiative, Ms. Lillian Fan, international director and co-founder of Cotanyo Foundation, Ms. Heidi Kwa, CEO and founder of Refuge for the Refugees, Mr. James Poitang Bik, advocate and ambassador of Myanmar Ethnics Organization, Ms. Su Yun Tae, Assistance Livelihood and Economic Inclusion Officer, media partners, and to all the NGOs, institutions, and to everyone who has joined us today. We would like to warmly welcome you to the World's Refugee Day, where we talk together and act together to create a community-based strategy for refugee work rights. I am Jasmine Juju.
And this is Kum.
And we will be your MCs for today. To start off this wonderful event, may I invite everyone to a prayer that will be led by Pastor Mang No from Mana Worship Center.
Let's pray. Father, thank you for giving us this wonderful opportunity in this afternoon, Lord. Thank you for bringing us all together over here, especially our chief guest over here, our great leader over here. Lord, as we are going to celebrate the World Refugee Day today, Lord, we ask you to bless our leaders over here and the world leaders in the world. Lord, we just want to see our young leaders and new generation to stand up and make the world better and more peaceful, Lord. We ask you to take complete control of our program. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Mangno, for the prayer. Now, nothing can be more reassuring and heartwarming than affectionate words of welcome, isn't it? So to formally welcome us, let us lend our ears to the chairman of the Myanmar Ethnics Organization, Mr. Paupi, to give an opening speech and remarks.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, nice to meet you all today at World Refugee Days. I'm not going to introduce anymore as our MC have introduced. So hello. Okay, 1,086,000 refugees and asylum seekers from Myanmar in neighboring country as of 30 June 2022. According to the UN, an estimated 1,704,000 internally displaced people, IDPs, were reported across the country as of 6 March 2023, including 1,376,000 people newly displaced since 1st of February 2021. Risks of arrest and detention significantly increased during the reporting period after de facto authorities extended the country's state of emergency for another 6 months and imposed martial law in 47 townships across the country on 2nd February. In the Northwest, the situation was highly violent, notably in Magwe and Sakai region, where frequent airstrike, arson attacks, and landmine incidents sparked new displacement within Myanmar and to neighboring India. Telecommunications, including internet services, remained unstable and hampered humanitarian access and assistance to people in need. In the southeast, heavy fighting, shelling, landmine incidents, and roadblocks were reported in multiple states and regions, including near town centers and IDPs sites. The forced return to displaced people in Palo Township, the Ninari region, was reported following the declaration of martial law. School-aged children's access to education has also been affected by this heightened insecurity. In Kachin and Xi'an North, civilian injuries and casualties continue to be reported following an increase in landmines and other explosive remnants. An uptick in robberies and kidnapping for ransom incidents has also been reported. In Malaysia, owing to their lack of legal status and documentation, refugee and asylum seekers have limited access to health, education, and livelihood opportunities, while also facing discrimination and security issues when accessing state protection services. These factors place refugees, women, and children at serious risk, exploitation, abuse, neglect, and violence. Without legal status, refugees are unable to register marriage, preventing them from seeking legal protection from domestic violence. Those who are not registered with the UNHCR office are in fear of arrest and deportation all the time. The absence of viable pathway to self-reliance or self-improvement significantly increases the risk of refugee becoming victim of early marriage, sexual exploitation, abusive relationships, and other forms of gender-based violence, GBV. Without legal status and access to social protection, there is nowhere they can hide from these dangers. Refugees are at risk at home, in public spaces, at workplaces, and especially in detention facilities. Refugees and asylum seekers are also unable to register their marriage with the National Registration Department of Religious Bodies, hindering refugees, survivors of spousal abuse from seeking legal protection. In conclusion, let us stand together in solidarity. Let us defend the integrity of the international protection range and let us never lose sight of our common humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Paupy, for the opening speech. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our very first performance of the day will be a Myanmar dance composed of all the ethnics in Myanmar, from Myanmar, and this will be performed by the Mon community. Who is ready for some performance? Now, the message of the song in the performance about 3 goals as follows. First, for a better future, we youths have to put effort to make it happen. Second, to have a developed and peaceful environment, a nation, we youths have to be dutiful and responsible. Last but not least, the third, we youths have to learn and embrace cultural diversity and learn how to be good leaders and good followers, whether it be at work, at community, or at family. We are nothing without you, you're nothing without us, so we youths have to unite as one. Ladies and gentlemen, let this message be the food for thought for the day. Now let's give them a round of applause.
thay một lai quay bắt đầu tê xa bồi
rồi nằm mò chắc ta ra tay mà gã nè còn đê xe hấp bơi ตราไตมกะเนกอเดเซฮอปอย
Thank you to the dancers and a wonderful performance. Next, it is an absolute pleasure for us to invite our special guest, Mr. Thomas Albrecht, who is a representative from the UNHCR Malaysia, up to the stage, please. Sure. Mr. Thomas, we actually have a gift of appreciation prepared for you. Please accept this.
You should have waited to the end of the speech. But thank you so much. Dear friends and colleagues, dear friends of refugee protection, today as we come together, we mark World Refugee Day. This is a day to honor the courage, strength and contributions of millions of people around the world who have been forced to flee their homes due to violence or persecution or war. The echo is okay. It is a day to remember that with help from It is a day to remember that with help from welcoming communities and neighbors, people can rebuild their lives and their networks and even thrive. However, it is sobering to realize that we mark World Refugee Day in a world that leaves many of the 35 million refugees in limbo. Too often, my conversations start with counterparts stating that there is a refugee problem. And frequently, I then have to explain that there is not a refugee problem, but that it is the refugees who have a problem. The problem of having to fear persecution, the problem of having to flee, often having to leave behind much of what made their lives, often family and loved ones. The real problem is persecution by ruthless perpetrators. These criminals in the home countries of refugees are the problem that needs to be recognized and resolved. UNHCR's tagline for World Refugee Day this year is "Hope away from home, a world where refugees are always included." This is apt in the context of the positive developments with the Malaysian government, which fuel our optimism in terms of the steps towards achieving a better enabling environment for refugees and asylum seekers. UNHCR has maintained engagement with the government on matters related to this, particularly in the shape of a national asylum framework, which includes access to legal work, as is the theme today. Now more than ever, it is important for all partners to come together and present a united, cohesive approach in advocating for refugee inclusion and access to basic rights and services. The silver lining of the pandemic has shown the power and magnitude of unity in responding to a crisis when common understanding is formed across all walks of life and differences can be put aside to work towards a greater good. The onus is on us, as informed and active members of the community, to try to foster this common understanding and to curb misinformation, which, as we have seen, can have exponential, detrimental effects on the community and any progress we have made as a whole. It should be our priority to strengthen evidence-based advocacy. Messaging backed by facts not only holds the strongest against misinformation, but also helps policymakers build an accurate image of the needs on the ground, the potential benefits of inclusion, and ultimately will feed into policy changes that are representative of the population in its targets. As with the words, today, act, talk together. Work towards the protection space for all refugees, regardless of their country of origin or ethnicity. Convene different stakeholders together, leveraging on respective strengths and reaching a common goal. In the spirit of the Sustainable Development Goals and Malaysia Madani, work towards an environment of shared space and prosperity together without leaving anyone behind. We can all commit to do our part in providing more hope, opportunities, and solutions for refugees while they are away from home. Including refugees in the communities where they have found safety is the most effective way to enable them to rebuild their lives and contribute to local economies and the countries hosting them. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, today in Malaysia there are some 181,000 refugee men, women and children who have been forced to flee their countries due to war, persecution and complex human rights issues. We have many opportunities today with various stakeholders in the government, private sector and civil society alike to strengthen support towards refugees, innovative approaches and to explore new areas of cooperation and collaboration to address both the interests of Malaysians and the protection needs of refugees in ways that are mutually reinforcing. Working more closely in partnership is also critical in strengthening advocacy. Honored guests, on this World Refugee Day celebration, allow me to express my deepest appreciation to all refugee friends. I pay tribute to your perseverance and fortitude in rebuilding your lives after having fled the worst forms of violence and persecution. And I honor your achievements and contributions to the communities that have welcomed you. Allow me also to express my profound thanks to all governments and peoples around the world who have worked together to support refugees. Their commitment and dedication has never been more crucial. We know that there is a high cost to exclusion, and there is a significant benefit and return on investment to inclusion in all aspects of life. Bringing back normalcy through inclusion of refugees is the best investment any society can make. As a result of being forcibly displaced from their homes due to conflict and persecution, refugees have distinct and often more acute needs compared to other non-citizens in Malaysia. Similar to local communities, refugee communities typically rely on informal networks, self-help and social welfare groups to support families and individuals facing hardship, especially with basic necessities and psychosocial support. Experience worldwide has shown that well-organized self-help and social welfare groups are central to managing refugee situations. These community groups reinforce the dignity of refugees, encourage healthy behavior, improve mental health, and promote peace within and between communities. This is especially true here in Malaysia, where refugees do not receive material assistance from the government and thus must be fully self-reliant. Refugee self-help and social welfare groups therefore take a vital role in supporting refugees to access essential services without placing additional requirements on public systems. Self-help groups undertake volunteer initiatives, improve families' capacity for greater self-reliance, and strengthen mental health through social activities and networks in order to restore hope. Refugee social and community support groups work to provide essential social support to navigate host societies, institutions, and mitigate social problems by building bridges with host societies while helping to implement government initiatives, as we, for example, have seen highly successfully during the COVID-19 pandemic and the related vaccination campaign. Working together with refugee self-help and social welfare groups provides an avenue to implement sustainable public programs in areas such as community welfare, health, and security. These groups are key not only to promoting the Madani version of a civilized, skilled, and inclusive society based on sustainability, prosperity, innovation, respect, trust, and compassion, but also to support the Sustainable Development Goal Target 10.2, which aims to empower and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion of all, and to promote peaceful and inclusive societies. While a framework is being developed that permits refugees to work formally in Malaysia, many of the 133,000 refugees of working age in Malaysia seek employment in the grey economy in order to have access to legal work. Refugees would be able to fulfill alleviating human trafficking concerns, plan on forced labor, which calls for a human-centered strategy to protect refugees and asylum seekers from labor abuses. This is vital to maximize the potential contribution of refugees to Malaysian economy. Billion ringgit to annual gross domestic product through higher spending, as well as 50 million ringgit in taxes, according to the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs in Malaysia. A survey conducted by the Malaysian Employers Federation found that 69% of employers were interested in hiring refugees if they could do so legally. Unlike migrant workers, refugees, as we know, were forced to flee their countries of origin. This means that restrictions usually applicable to foreign workers are not practical for refugees who cannot safely return home if their employment under a particular employer or sector comes to an end. But a well-designed scheme with minimal bureaucracy can be a win-win-win for everyone. And you will certainly hear much more about these great opportunities during the forthcoming panel discussion. In closing, let me emphasize once more: talk, act together. And of sharing perspectives and views in the spirit of inclusivity and collaboration to foster hope away from home. And I thank you. And I have to apologize. As I had told the organizers, I have to go for another meeting. And also the panel discussion, and I'm eagerly looking forward to get a briefing from her and the other colleagues who are going to meet up in interest and all your efforts and the work for your communities. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. It was very insightful, and we have a sense of hopefulness after hearing your speech, as we now get reminded there are people out there who acknowledge the difficulties that we refugees treating as another passerby of the day are instead focusing and pushing. Thank you so much for your speech, Mr. Thomas, and taking your time off your busy schedule. Thank you so much.
Next, let's welcome Mr. James Boitangpik, who is an advocate, to the stage to read us an important message from an open letter.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's great honor to see all of you here together. Your participation is a huge encouragement for our organizations and our community. Charlie is here, but then YB Charlie is here, but then he was looking for his parking and then also struggling to get. He said one of his staff got minor injury, so he has to relocate her first. So now I think he just arrived downstairs. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we have two. Because we want to take these events as an occasion to voice, to raise our voice, and to send some message and an open letter to both UNHCR, and then one is to the Home Minister. Charles here. Charles in front here. The first, I will go with an open letters from our MEO, Myanmar organizations, MEO, from MEO to UNHCR. Allow me to read them. Dear Mr. Thomas Albrecht, representative of UNHCR and his leadership department, the Myanmar Annex Organizations MEO today's host of World Refugee Days 2023 would like to hand our community recommendation to the UNHCR personnel based on what the community deems crucial for the current situations. The 2021 military coup had a significant impact on politics, the economic, livelihoods, and human rights, as well as is well known. Civilians' lives are no longer secure under the military's rule in Myanmar as a result of ongoing civil conflict. Many civil servants in Myanmar who deny service under the military's undemocratic regimes also retreated to Malaysia. So we, MEO, therefore demands and recommends that the UNHCR number one, to initiate the immediate registrations of newcomers, particularly former civil servants known as CDM, whose lives require special attentions. Or does the UNHCR require that the CDMer be apprehended or deported back to Myanmar first in order to get registered? Number two, to speed up the process of families inclusions, which has been which has been very slow, despite the fact that the office is expanding and the numbers of UNHCR employees is growing. Number three, asylum seekers whose refugee status were unjustly terminated in 2018 as a result of the cessation must be afforded fair and prompt reopening considerations, not ad hoc procedures. Number four, treats the Myanmar Annex Organizations, MEOs, as a formal refugees organizations without discriminations or leaving the organizations behind in order for the organizations to achieve its missions and objective for its refugees and asylum seekers. To this regard, MEO's existence is to this. With the organizations of MEO are confident that UNHCR will examine the affirmations, recommendations, and respond positively without delays. Thank you so much. This is from our organizations because we think this is very crucial for our peoples currently. So this is an open letter to the UNHCR. And then the other one is, of course, to the government. That's very important. Open letter to the Home Minister Datuk Seri Saifuddin Nasution Ismail and his leadership ministry. This is from our organization, Myanmar Ethnic Organizations MEO, the host of World Refugee Day 2023 events, applauds the statements of Home Minister Datuk Seri Saifuddin. The government is considering allowing refugees to work. Similar to the report was also made by Malaysia Now News on May 9, 2023, as it represents a bright future for refugees and asylum just for taking a very courageous step of commitment in humanitarianism toward the refugees issue. However, our organization is concerned about whether the government schemes for refugees' work rights is consistent or in 2016 pilot project was failed. The programs in 2016 was deemed a complete failure, and the government should take this into account when reviving the agendas of legalizing refugee rights to work, as we want it to be as successful this time. Under the current administrations, a failure is no longer permissible, and the organization has a complete faith in this cabinet. In order to successfully implement the program this time, the MEO organizations would like to make the following suggestions. Number one, accept the participations of partner third parties such as NGOs in town. Number two, consult relevant NGOs and NGOs in the decision-making process, with opportunity to represent the voice of refugees and to make recommendations to the government. Number four, as a matter of humanity, relax restrictions on employers' hirings of refugees and asylum seekers, or contemplate mechanisms for employers to employ those groups. Number five, considers offering refugees and asylum seekers skill-based employment as well without limiting the sector. Our organization believes that the current recommendations when making decisions regarding refugees and asylum seekers. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mr. James. It is a very important message, and as our previous speakers have also already said, as of end May 2023, there are 181,000 refugees and asylum seekers registered with UNHCR in Malaysia. Some 157,000 are from Myanmar, comprising some 105,000 Rohingyas, 23,000 Chins, and 28,000 other ethnic groups from conflict-affected areas or fleeing persecution in Myanmar. To dive a video that tells you more about the struggles also here in Malaysia.
Yo piazza yo taro yo taro phaya ke de no
Lan no ba ai de cáiလေးတွေကိုမြင်ပြီးလန့်လို့ကျွန်တော်ကလိုတွေပြေသွားကြောက်တယ်စာမတင်ရတော့ဘူးကျွန်တော်ကလည်းပျော်ပျော်ရွှင်ရွှင်နဲ့စာတင်နေ
ပြည်သူလူထုတွေအားလုံးကိုတက်ဖြတ်ခဲ့တယ်ကျွန်တော်တို့လည်းတွေ့နေတယ်ကျွန်တော်တို့အနေနဲ့ဒီလိုမျိုးကောက်ကျစ်စင်တဲ့အပြုတ်မှုမျိုးကျွန်တော်တို့မကြိုက်ဘူးနောက်ပြီးရင်ကျွန်တော်တို့ရဲ့ပြည်သူလူထုကိုဒီလိုမျိုးကိုကာကွယ်ရမယ့်လူတွေကို သူတို့တွေကိုဒီလိုမျိုးရဲရဲဆက်လောက်တာမျိုးလေကျွန်တော်မကြိုက်ဘူး
ကျွန်တော်မြန်မာပြည်မှာနေဖို့အဆင်မပြေလို့မလေးရှားရောက်လာတော့ပါ
ကျွန်တော်ဘယ်လိုကောင်းသူနေကြမှာနေပါလဲရှင်ကျွန်တော်တို့ဘယ်လိုကောင်းသူနေကြမှာဒုက္ခတွေအများကြီးရှိပါတယ်
မြန်မာလူမျိုးတွေနဲ့တခြားတိုင်းရင်းသားလူမျိုးတွေအားကိုးရမဲနေတဲ့အချိန်မှာ MEO ရုံပေါ်ပေါက်လာတဲ့အတွက်ကျွန်တော်တို့တွေနဲ့အရန်ပင်ဝမ်းသာမိပါတယ်
ကျွန်တော်ဗမာလူမျိုးတစ်ယောက်ပါကျွန်တော်တို့ကို MEO ကလူမျိုးမခွဲခြားဘဲနဲ့ကျွန်တော်တို့ warmly welcome လုပ်တဲ့အတွက်ကျွန်တော်အနေနဲ့များစွာဂုဏ်ယူဝမ်းမြောက်မိပါတယ်
ကျွန်တော်မလေးရှားစားရောက်တဲ့ချိန်မှာ MEO ရုပ်ချုပ်ကနေပြီးတော့တစ်ဆက် member ဝက်ဖက်ပြတဲ့အတွက်ကျေးဇူးတူတင်ရှိပါသည်
ผมมีปีแต่เรื่องพัดตรงปีมาเมากำมุนกระสุนไปรู้แหละย่องอภิสิงเป็นที่ก็ว่านี่
MEO ရုံးရှိခြင်းအဖြစ်အကူအညီရတဲ့အတွက်အထူးပဲကျေးဇူးတင်ရှိပါတယ်ရှင်ကျမတို့အတွက်အထောက်အကူအများကြီးရပါတယ်
It is truly heartbreaking to watch this myself. This is my first time watching this video too. To move on, I think it's best that we take a little break to cheer us up again by serenading our ears to a singing performance by Mr. Sian Hoi. And before he comes to the stage, let us please invite his band called The Restart. The title of the song that he will be performing is called Steady My Heart. The stage is all yours.
Hello everyone. Nice to meet you all. Firstly, I want to praise God for this time. And I want to sing a song that stayed in my heart. Wish it could be easy. Why is life so messy? Why is pain a part of us? There are days to feel like nothing ever goes right. Sometimes it just hurts so much. But you're here, you're here. I know I can trust you. Even when it hurts, even when it's hard, even when it all just falls apart, I will run to you, 'cause I know that you are lover of my soul, healer of my scars. It's steady my heart. It's steady my heart. I'm not gonna worry. I know that you got me right inside the palm of your hand. Each and every moment was good, it won't get broken. Happen just the way you planned. You are here, you're real. I know I can trust you. Even when it hurts, even when it's hard, even when it all just falls Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Sang Hoi, for the amazing performance. It was a truly strong voice, wasn't it, everybody? Yeah, mesmerizing, truly. Now, moving onwards, we have a statement to be made by Ms. Nuampi. Is Ms. Nuampi here? She's representing all of the Myanmar refugees seeking asylum here in Malaysia. Ms. Nuampi, whenever you're ready, the stage is all yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nompi. I'm from Myanmar Ethnic Organization. Today is a Refugee Day, and we should remember all refugees around the world. Actually, today's event is not just a celebration. It is also an opportunity to raise the voice of our people. Malaysia has been a destination for many refugees, especially from Myanmar. It is undeniable that all minority ethnic groups from Myanmar are in Malaysia. Therefore, I always describe Malaysia as a garden full of many different kinds of flowers. The military in Myanmar has resulted in many more refugees coming to Malaysia, as their own country has been a threat to their lives, families, and livelihoods. Many educated, skilled, and uneducated people have also chosen neighboring countries like Malaysia, India, and Thailand as their destination to save their families and lives. Among these three countries, Malaysia obviously has the greatest number of refugees from every different country, especially Myanmar, which is believed to have the highest number. Since the military coup, Malaysia has become a hero and a beacon of hope for the citizens of Myanmar at the Asian and international levels. We are very thankful for standing up with the people of Myanmar and supporting our resistance against the coup. However, in the current situation inside the country, refugees are still considered illegal people, and eliminating their existence is sadly still happening. We can see immigration rates against them and deporting them back to Myanmar through the agreement with the Myanmar embassy, which is under the administration of the undemocratic military. Therefore, I would like to beg Malaysia to consider the existence of the embassy or its cooperation with the Myanmar embassy. It could affect Malaysia's image as supporting the Myanmar military that is murdering its own people. Do not let your hand shed the blood of innocents. It has been known that Malaysia is a labor shortage, but the existence of refugees and asylum seekers is not just counted in the matter. So my question to the government is, since there is free labor within the country to solve the labor shortage, why look for expensive labor over the cheap one? Please give us a chance to contribute to the country's economy as well, and we will not let you down. Another issue to address is the UNHCR. The refugee agency has been reluctant to provide effective protection for these refugees. Today, the undocumented numbers of refugees and asylum seekers is much higher than the documented group. Having too many undocumented people could pose a threat to the local community as well as national security. Therefore, UNHCR should carry out their new registration of refugees from Myanmar as soon as possible to eliminate the number of undocumented people within Malaysia by determining their status. The reason why registration and its documentation are important is that they could aid the national security of the country as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Nompi, for helping us become more aware of the problems and for telling us the ways of how we can solve them. Next, we have a lot of performances coming your way, and we also have another singer in the house. He will be singing Terima Kasih Malaysia. Let us welcome Mr. Sobwang Mong. We also have another band. Let us welcome his band, the Restart Band.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay. The word about the event of our country of Myanmar situation. This is no peace at all until today. We are afraid everywhere and every minute. At that time, the government of Malaysia and people of Malaysia have set up to secure for our life. We are unlimited thankful to Malaysia government and Malaysian people. And again, thank you so much to all the staff of UNHCR to help us to be more security from all of our different kinds of difficult situations. That's why I composed this song with my friends, which mean Terima Kasih Malaysia, which means thank you so much Malaysia. Okay. Oh, one more thing. Thank you so much, President of Mr. Paupi, MEO. You invite me to participate with this song. Okay.
dầu gam kêu loan má họ xa vần xa dòng khăm lâu mừng ta quá xa khác xa càng tuôn lệ doa sao lim noa lại giống mi lệ ngay tên to sắm ghi băng khi hình khen biên na vang hoa ban sol vắng in ca hay cầm giá tên dông kêu gõ gá xia im đắm tuy loan na lâu lâu na muốn a doa tăng hạt sát gần thế na gam pa aku sak nop nagam mintak tui pigal kata negle konsule dan wal elo nadi wal nyam kanun na wal lo tan bang kim na awai di kuat tang siana kapkan nunai tui pilihan pi bang lian mo simlay gua bang inun su simo gimle tol chua ki nam dang sing dang kut noaya palwak ban mui gua zin long salbang tan la sen luang yên chế là tang koi le Bonde ya ni La wai di puat sin tang sia na Ling le suan te no ka seli Kun na di siang sin na san ba Ta ga Malaysia Sum min tang lam bang song di Ta ko ban ba ban hong le Ta lim qua ya hong belly mo Terima kasih Malaysia Big love and for the music team The Restart Band Di buah tentang siana Ling le suang te no kaseli Unadi siang sina sanba Sintaga Malaysia Sumintang lambang songdi Kalwapan babang hong lengi Talim nuaya hong belding mo Terima kasih Malaysia Malaysia Sumintang lambang sendiri Kawapan babang hong leng Nalim nuaya hong beling mo Terima kasih Malaysia Wow Terima kasih Malaysia Terima kasih semua
Thank you, Mr. Sobamo and his band, the Restart team, for the amazing performance. It is truly a quality live music right there in front of us just happened. Eh? I mean, it's already very hard to make different musicians synchronize into one. And on top of that, it's high quality some more. Truly amazing. Now, it's not every day that we get to enjoy a cultural dance from Myanmar as well, isn't it? So we prepared another one cultural dance. So everyone, please welcome ZKDA Zomi Cultural Dance. Hang tight, everyone, hang tight. Any minute now, or any seconds. Just hang tight. All right, let's get another round of applause for ZKTA for this cultural dance.
Wow. And also, we are officially giving up on our podium. Wonderful. They're so cute and so small. Okay. We not only have dancers and singers in our house, we also have a talented pianist. Let's welcome Mr. C.L. Tongboy, who will be reciting a piece called He's a Pirate. Woo!
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is CL Tuangboy. You can call me Tuangboy or just CL. The song or the music that I'm gonna perform is called He's a Pirate from a movie, one of my favorite, Pirates of the Caribbean. Thank you.
Truly amazing. Jasmine, could you please bring your phone because I've left my phone at home. You know why?
Why?
You did ask why didn't you? All right, because I wanted to get his number down so I can get some private lessons after.
For sure. Will you teach us, sir? Okay, he just ignored you. He said no.
Emotional damage right there. All right, so next, moving on. So let's give him a round of applause. First of all, let's do it one more time. All right, so today's event is hosted by Myanmar Ethnic Organization, and it's only right that we share about what we do to make days like this happen. So we would like to tell you more about our organization, our aims, our vision, and our goals. Therefore, we would like to invite Mr. Paupi up to the stage to lead the presentation.
Hello. And once again, I'm here again. So I think from our media side, can you please open the slide, PowerPoint? Already? Okay. This is Myanmar Ethnic Organization. So our motto is like humility, humanity, touching community. This is our current MEO organization structure, leadership, October 2022 to present. So my full name is Kai Sian Pao. And here, General Secretary and Coordinator for Women Affairs, Pao Nuam. And then Outreach Intervention for Thang Zhou Ma. And then Advocate Ambassador for James Boy Thang Bik, author of Living Without Rights. So Banking, Finance, and Health Coordinator for Stephen Gopal. So what we are doing is sometimes we are doing court interpreter, and employment dispute, we have assistance, and then mobile clinic with employment disputes with AAM, together with AAM, or here also North South Initiative, and then AAM means Asylum Access Malaysia, okay? So here we also doing mobile clinic with Red Crescent every month mostly, and then with Mercy Malaysia as well. And then new registrations, and then here is we also do US and Australia Embassy assistance. And then phone number update to UNHCR, family inclusion at UNHCR file, arrest and detention report to OPI, that is Outreach Protection Unit to UNHCR, advocacy for refugee from Myanmar. And then we are also doing with the currently we are Visa card, that is like a kind of e-wallet, that is machine trade, and e-wallet, Visa and MasterCard. Also we are working with them. So inquiry on resettlement process for the members, and then learning centers, we have about 5 learning centers that we're looking after, and then community engagement. So this is the Women's Day and First Step Academic Graduation organized by MEO on March 25 of 2023. And this is the mobile clinic at Kota Damansara here, this area, with the Red Crescent as well. And then here, food and vegetable distribution at Taman Sri Kuching. This also with the kitchen help soup assembly with them. So here is we are looking for a shelter at Taman Sentosa Pradana, but yeah, we are going and looking for the shelter, but we don't, which is not yet established. Yeah. So this is the translator while I'm translating in Makama Kajang, February 23, 2023. And this is the COVID vaccination at Kajang in that area on 2022. And then here is the meeting with UNHCR representative issue on October 2022 with ZRC and ZAM. Yeah. And thematic meeting at UNHCR office October 7, 2022. And I'm meeting at Bukit Bintang Hotel on September 27, 2023. And then here is we have also basic English class, and also here Christmas party at one of the learning center, and visiting to Muro. And here's we do outreach for the health assistant, like translation for the members. And here's we go to Majestic Tumpat for underage arrested on October 5, 2022. Yes. So purpose is there are communities in Malaysia with their own ethnicity. At the same time, some ethnicities from Myanmar do not have community. When they went to others' community, they were denied membership registration. So our motto itself is humility, humanity, touching community. To give out whatever service in the community needs. We must help people from any ethnicity as long as they are refugees from Myanmar. We also will help non-Myanmar refugee if they need help or refer to the relevant community to train leaders and who can later lead their own communities. Importance of bringing in women as leaders. Women is very important in an organization because they are the ones who can handle things what the men can handle. From work experience, women seems to do the job better than men. They are more responsible, detailed, and empathic. To maintain the organization integrity, women must be involved to create a gender balance. Women are just as talented and potential as men. They must given the opportunity. Women contribute greatly to the quality and work performance of the organization because they make our perspective richer. Gender-related issues are better understood when a woman is involved. So, importance of solidarity. Human beings are social animals. We cannot live alone, especially in Malaysia. We must come together as a refugee, regardless of gender, race, and color. Solidarity amongst refugees and locals. As we are living in the same country, we must build social relationship with locals is very important. Sharing culture, knowing each other can understand each other, and they can make a better community. The target organization that we must work with are progressive NGOs, local individuals who support our cause, other refugee groups, not only those from Myanmar and other nationalities. Speak more the employment rights. We have to think the way to build more support from the locals. So reflection, how can we improve? Must we plan for the future? What must we do? Why must we work better? We must work better because the situation that refugees living in Malaysia must improve in many things. Plan to enhance our work performance, train all the leaders, finding fund for the community so that the performance will be better and faster. And what does MEO want to be? Trying to get official recognition from UNHCR is our one of the work that we work, and for our office for the betterment of refugee rights in Malaysia. How do we identify the maintain talents in the organization? Well, you have flexible time. Why not you volunteer in Myanmar Ethnics organization as you are already serving for the people? Reflection, continue. A community budget, where do we get the fund for this? How do we build community wealth, create an internal module to train future leaders? How do we recruit people into the organization? Provide services for others community to set up. The hardest part to organize in Myanmar Ethnics is the language and ethnicity. How do we break out from the ethnic model that the Tan model had preserved? This legacy still is felt with the Myanmar Ethnics in Malaysia and the world. We must think of equality over quantity in our work, make networks utilize resources efficiently. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. It was super insightful for us. This is both of our first time working for MEO, and we can see how passionate they are to make a change in all of our lives and how much energy they put into this event, and we're just so thankful for you. Okay, next we have another performance, and we are very excited to welcome another singer, Miss Kim Kim, who will be performing Pray by Justin Bieber.
Hi everyone, it's such a pleasure to meet all of you. I may not sound exactly like Justin Bieber, but yeah, I will try my best. And I pray, I just can't sleep tonight, knowing that things ain't right. It's in the papers, it's on the story, it's everywhere that I go. Children are crying, soldiers are dying, some people don't have a home. But I know there's sunshine beyond that rain, I know there's good times behind that pain. Can you tell me how I can make a change? I close my eyes and I can see a better day. I close my eyes and pray. I close my eyes and I can see a better close my eyes and pray. I lose my appetite, knowing kids starve tonight. Am I a sinner? 'Cause of my dinner is still there on my plate. Oh, I got a vision to make a difference, and it's starting today. I know there's sunshine beyond that rain. I know there's good times behind that pain. Can you tell me how I can make a change? I close my eyes and I can see a better day. I close my eyes and pray. I close my eyes and I can see a better day. I close my eyes and I pray for the broken hearted. I pray for the life not started. I pray for all the lungs not breathing. I pray for all the souls don't need a prayer. Can you give them one a day? I just can't sleep tonight. Can someone tell me how to make a change? I close my eyes and I can see a better day. I close my eyes and pray. I close my eyes and I can see a better day. I close my eyes and I pray. Oh, I pray. And I pray. I close my eyes and pray. Thank you so much.
Not like Justin Bieber? No, you're better than Justin Bieber. What did I say? Maybe I'm biased. Maybe I am. Very good. That was a very beautiful performance, Miss Kim Kim. Thank you so much. A round of applause for Miss Kim Kim once more. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as our last performance of the day, we have one more cultural dance, and I hope you savor as much as you can because it's going to be the last performance of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're ready to welcome ZKDA for their Sokam Zomi dance.
Thank you so much for this amazing performance. Last but not least, our main event of today, which is a panel discussion, and that will be moderated by Ms. Katrina from Amnesty International Malaysia. May I please invite you to the stage to accept our bouquet of appreciation, please.
What is that? Now let's also welcome our panel speakers of the day, starting from Mr. James Boy Dang Bik. He is an advocate and ambassador of Myanmar Ethnic Organization. Mr. James Boy, turn. Starting from our panel speakers, starting from Mr. James Boy Dang Bik. He is an advocate and ambassador of Myanmar Ethnic Organization.
Mr. YB Charles Santiago, Chairman of SPAN and former MP of Klang.
Ms. Heidi Kwa, the CEO and founder of Refuge for the Refugees.
Ms. Su Yun Tae, Assistant Livelihood and Economic Inclusion Officer.
Mr. Adrian Pereira, ED and co-founder of North-South Initiative.
Ms. Lilian Fan, International Director and co-founder of Kutanyo Foundation. The Q&A sessions will be held later on.
မိကုများမေးချင်ပါကခိတ္တခဏလေးဆောင်ပေးပါခဏချင်းအချိန်ပေးမှာဟုတ်ပါတယ်နော်
Can you start? Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Katrina. I am the Executive Director of Amnesty International Malaysia. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to be the moderator of this wonderful panel. Firstly, I just want to thank Emio, James, Palpi, and others for putting this panel together and for inviting me to be a part of it. For today's discussion, we have about 45 minutes, so not a lot of time, but a lot of important things to discuss together. We have some questions to go through. It's going to be a bit more of a conversation, and so I may direct a particular question at you. But if you're not that comfortable answering, that's okay. You can pass it on to somebody else. And I also know that one of our guests, Mr. Charles, unfortunately has to leave at 5 for another meeting, but we will continue on for a little while after he has to go. And then we will have some questions at the end. I'm going to start by asking everybody to very briefly, less than 30 seconds, just introduce yourselves, your name and also what you do, and then we'll start with our questions. Maybe we can begin with James.
Well, as you already know, that I'm James Boythambik, and that I'm currently a law student and second year, and then for the moment we're at semester break, and then I'm currently serving as MEO as ambassador and advocate. Thank you so much.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adrian. I'm a director and co-founder of the North-South Initiative. And the purpose of North-South Initiative is to build solidarity among all members of society. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Mingalaba. My name is Lilian Fan, and I am the co-founder and director of Gatanio Foundation. We do mainly work on refugee protection, and we also work very closely with Parliament. We're the secretariat to the all-party parliamentary group on refugee policy. So really working hard in every way to try to improve the policy environment for all of you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Suyen. I'm the Assistant Livelihoods and Economic Inclusion Officer for UNHCR. It's a very long name, but my job scope essentially is covered in the title itself. My scope of work really focuses a lot more on the policy and advocacy side, so advocating for access to legal work, economic inclusion, as well as other things such as digital and financial inclusion.
Hi everyone, my name is Heidi. I'm the founder and director of Refuge for the Refugees. Our work really looks into supporting community-based schools. We support community-based schools with rental, with volunteers, with helping structure the schools with access to syllabus. We also run livelihood programs with the refugee community, trying to support different ones in the community to start their own businesses. We do case management work. We look into rental aid, food aid, emergency aid, medical aid. We do partnerships with a clinic in PJ actually, where we allow refugees, where we partner with the clinic to give refugees access to quality healthcare. So every week, a van kind of sweeps around KL, pick up members that requires access to healthcare and bring them to a clinic in PJ. We get billed at the end of every month, and we look into cases when refugees get arrested and detained. We do policy advocacy work with the government as well. Our main work goes towards really making sure that the refugee community gets the support they need, immediate access to support, yeah.
My name is Charles Santiago. I co-chair the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights, which is a regional human rights body involving parliamentarians. I also chair the Water Commission of Malaysia at this time. Besides that, I also manage and run an NGO called Monitoring Globalization. And at this time, we are working on climate change as well as on forced labor. We're doing a research on forced labor and also looking at other issues that affect vulnerable communities in the country. My colleagues are also here as part of the program. But before I hand over the mic to Katrina, I would like to express my three-finger salute to all our friends here. You know the three-finger salute, right? Thank you. You guys have been too long here, though.
Thank you all so much, and I'd highly encourage everybody to come up to the panelists after and to ask a bit more about their work and to also share your own stories and experiences. So jumping straight into it, we heard some of the figures at the start, about 190,000 refugees registered with UNHCR, about 133,000 who are adults of working age. I think a UNHCR study said something like 60% of refugee adults are working. So the question today on this panel isn't about should refugees be allowed to work. We know refugees are working because working is, the right to work is a fundamental right. It's how we survive. It's tied to all our other rights. What we're trying to understand is what is it about the situation in Malaysia, politically, culturally, socially, where the very precious right to work has not been protected, and how can we collectively figure out how to address that? So maybe just sort of starting, there have been discussions in government over the decades around refugee work. It was a refugee pilot in 2016, which we'll talk about briefly. Recently also, government saying that perhaps we want to allow refugees to work in certain sectors. Firstly, I'll throw it to anybody who wants to pick it up first. What do you think are some of the assumptions that are made about refugees and about refugees working in Malaysia? Maybe Adrian, you want to kick us off?
Yes. Thanks for the question. One of the core points to remember is that, in terms of human rights, everyone is born equal and we have dignity. So that dignity is linked to your livelihood, whether it's given in the law or not, it's your right. And nobody can take that away from you. The misassumption that happens is that as a refugee, when you work, you are competing. This is the misassumption, that you're competing with others, and that certain discriminatory philosophies kind of deny your right to work. So that is unfortunate, the way society happens to run, and it becomes our duty to correct these misconceptions through your own storytelling, your own fact-finding, and of course your own struggle to get back this right to work. Thanks.
Would anybody else like to add other assumptions you think people make, both about refugees, but also the right to work in Malaysia?
Maybe just to add on to that, a frequent narrative that we see often is that making the environment more enabling for refugees here would result in a pull factor. But what we're trying to challenge with that is that forced displacement is not a trend or a journey that people take because they are looking for better opportunities. The key word is there, forced displacement is forced, right? So people are traveling here because they have no choice. And more often than not, if you ask everyone here if they had the chance to go home, they would choose to go home. They would choose to be in their home countries where things are familiar to them. So that's another misconception, I think, that often comes up.
So maybe to put that in a simple way, the assumption is that if we treat people with dignity and respect, then that's why they come. And so let's not do that, because then they won't come. But actually people are coming because, as we saw in the video earlier, the situation is so terrible, and people are really afraid for their lives. And that is not the rationale for which we make our decisions. I think I also just want to add to that, with everything that we've seen today and heard, even just today in the performances, people come, the refugee community is diverse. So even from the Myanmar community itself, there is so much diversity and so much complexity and so many skills and resources and creativity. And I think sometimes when we speak about sort of refugee as a title, that is forgotten. And so I wanted to start with that, because I think when we are having this discussion, that we also remember that we're not just speaking of one group or one category of people, but there are people who come with all kinds of experiences and challenges, but also a lot to offer. So a lot of the proposals for refugee work are often tied to particular areas of employment. So for example, let's have refugees work in the plantations or in construction. But we also know that a lot of these areas are often where there's very high levels of abuse and exploitation. So my question maybe firstly to Charles is, you've done a lot of work and you understand sort of the migrant reality and refugee rights and labor rights. Now, what can we do to ensure that as we're thinking about plans for respecting refugee work, that we do not put refugees in the same situations of exploitation that we've seen over the years?
Let me preface the answer to Katrina's question by sharing with you a recent development that took place in the state of Selangor. A public utility in Selangor had returned to the Ministry of Home Affairs asking for refugees to be employed in the public utility. They waited for some time, and after some time they got a response saying that refugees are not entitled to work in Malaysia. That's number one. Number two, some refugees are already working, and the government closes their eyes on them, but technically they cannot be working in Malaysia. Okay? So the answer to your question really is that, one, there is a demand for workers in the country. And there's a demand, specific demand, both by public services, meaning government-run services, together with private employers who actually have made it quite clear to the government that we would rather employ refugees in Malaysia rather than migrant workers, who's much more expensive and so on. So the demand for workers, especially for refugees, is there. But however, the government has not resolved the issue of the work status, I must say, vis-a-vis the refugees. So I think this is where we have to make an economic case. The refugee community really has to sit together and make an economic case and do a bit of mapping, though. A bit of mapping on the various skill sets that we already have, and offer a solution, offer something very concrete to the government that the government can work on. I think this is something that we have to go as a way forward. So let's get the mapping done. And in conjunction with that, yes, there's a need for workers in the government services as well as in the private sector. But also I think there are lots of men and women who work from home and who produce stuff from home. Food, for example, right? They should also be empowered. They should be given some kind of a status to sell their product both in their homes as well as outside in the pasar malams and so on. Now, of recent, you know that there are some people who have gone and, I wanted to close them down and so on and so forth. I think this again goes back to the question of legitimacy. Therefore, the government has to legitimate the process. The government has to say, yes, we allow them. And of course, don't say this is the refugee booth or this is a refugee sales. No, you don't have to say those things though. But the point is the government actually says, yes, we want to go the way forward. So I think, again, this is a question of legitimacy. And I think in the concept of Madani, the present government's philosophy is organized around the notion of Madani. It's about compassion. It's about compassion. And I think we can start with that. At the same time, talk about the mapping of how many people are here, what is their skill set, and what kind of jobs can actually be done. That is, the reason I say that is because some time ago, there was an experiment done by the Home Affairs Minister involving a ministry involving the Rohingyas. It was a total disaster, absolute unmitigated disaster. They trained about, 500 people or 400 people or something, and the day when they're supposed to come to work, nobody turned up. So they didn't work properly, so the government is not sure how to manage this. So therefore, I think this is where UNHCR can be a liaison, with government, and also NGOs, Malaysian-based NGOs, working together with Myanmar or other refugee groups in the country, can talk to the government, especially on labor issues. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I have a whole lot of follow-up questions. And Adrian, I saw you nodding, very relieved just now. No, I'm coming to you soon. So a couple of things. I will come back to the question of home-based and livelihood projects, and also the pilot project in 2016. I think we should talk about it. But Lillian, I also wanted to turn to you, just building on that question to Charles about, yes, I think that, an understanding of what I'm hearing you say is that having a good picture of sort of the skill sets and the labor workforce, the workers that we have amongst the refugee communities, and making the case for that. But also, as we know, refugees are working. They already are working, and they are working in jobs that really keep the country going. In the service industry, in plantations, if you go to Cameron Highlands, the farmers, the food that we eat. So refugees are working. And Lillian, in your work, you've also been very much engaged with MPs, with government. What is that barrier So yes, it's not about now we need to understand before we let people work. That may be one, but what is the barrier to really respecting the rights of refugees who are already working?
Thanks for that question, Katrina. I mean, I would say, number one, thank you for really highlighting the point that it's true, refugees are already working, not waiting for, the formal, basically permission to work. Number one, because obviously people have to work, for that dignity, for that self-reliance. But number two, I think also, the communities that we have here in Malaysia who are seeking refuge from their home countries are so diverse and have such a diverse set of skills and experiences, and can actually very easily fit into so many sectors here in Malaysia. So, I mean, just looking at this community and many of the other communities from Myanmar, I mean, we know that they are working in so many sectors. In practically every important sector in Malaysia, you will find, workers from Myanmar who are really, really contributing. And, thank you so much for that performance of Terima Kasih Malaysia, but we should also be saying Terima Kasih and, Jesu Mare to all of you, because you really support our economies and our societies as well. So that's the first thing. The second thing is in Parliament, and I think, when it comes to policymakers, actually there is quite an agreement on both sides of political parties, both government as well as opposition. I would say that the narrative has shifted a bit, so that if you really talk, in not a very politicized way to members of parliament and policymakers, there isn't really a huge disagreement that refugees should work. Actually, a lot of policymakers have gotten to the point where they think this really makes a lot of sense, exactly for the reasons that Charles mentioned. There is a shortage, there are workers here who are already working, really the formalization just makes sense. Plus, there's more awareness amongst MPs and policymakers that, well, the refugees can't go back, and we shouldn't be sending them back, even though unfortunately we have, and we don't always respect non-refoulement or protection when it comes to deportation. But I think there's an increasing understanding still, if you look, that there has to be more provisions to allow refugees to work, and that's actually through the work of since 2019. Of the all-party parliamentary group. This was one issue that everyone agreed on. So we've been trying to look for issues where we can get consensus between all the parties. So we have representatives of most political parties in the APPG. And this was one issue that there was no opposition to. Everybody actually agreed, whether it was, the MPs from PAS, the MPs from DAP, the MPs from the Justice Party, PKR. Everyone agrees refugees should be allowed to work. The issue is which sectors, how should it be done, what kind of documentation, so I think that's one issue, it's the technicalities. But the second thing is, I think it's the bigger narrative of two things. One, at the policy level, there's still the narrative of national security, and like what Suyen said, this perception that allowing refugees to work formally will open the floodgates and there'll be a pull factor. And then secondly, this issue of the misperception and the xenophobia, which unfortunately is still a real issue. And I think that is also both something which sometimes makes the government hesitant to roll out policy and to announce policy direction, because they're afraid that there'll be a backlash. And unfortunately, the issue, even if most parties actually agree logically with this issue, sometimes the issue can still be used politically, right, for political campaigns and such. So I think this is one of the challenges. But I do think that we're moving in the direction where the narrative is starting to shift a bit. And as we heard also Mr. Thomas say, the Malaysian Employment Federation, businesses, there's a lot more demand and hopefully increasing vocalization from the private sector and from employers that they want refugees formally in the workforce. So that's really important.
Thank you so much, Lillian. I'm going to, just building on this conversation, turn to Adrian. So Adrian, a lot of your work is really around both refugee and migrant rights. I'd like to know from you, kind of if you can tease out a bit more the connection between migrant worker rights and refugee rights. I understand there are distinctions between the community and the definitions, but when it comes to workers and protection for workers, whether they're undocumented workers, whether they're migrant or refugee workers, and what are the lessons we can learn for how migrants have organized to protect their rights, and what are the opportunities for solidarity you're seeing between refugee and migrant communities? Because thinking about today's act together, I'm thinking about all of the people in Malaysia who maybe aren't from our communities, but who as workers face exploitation, we face challenges getting justice. And so if you could share some thoughts on that.
So in 2005, when I started my human rights work, I met a refugee. His name was Tuntum. So nice, stout guy. He had a sundry shop in Kajang. And what he would do is he would go to the labor department, he would go to the police station, he would go to the IR department with all the refugee labor cases. And that really inspired me on how one of the community leaders themselves can take up these cases and fight for their rights. So, and that's how I learned from him. I started my career in human rights because of this very inspiring figure. And when we looked at the cases, we were studying some of the cases before. So the law, when it comes to employment, actually doesn't discriminate. It's not based on your nationality or passport. There are some very minor ones, but the standards apply to everyone. So that should give us the confidence when we fight for our rights. But of course, when you go to the labor department, you go to the different government agencies, they do kind of discriminate at an individual level, but on paper, it shouldn't be. So, and even more shocking in the last few years, my organization is starting to get complaints from Malaysian workers. And I'm telling you, the Malaysian workers are saying, hey, Adrian, why are you fighting for migrant and refugee rights? We are abused. And I have found a very small amount of Malaysians who are quite brutalized in certain sectors. Yeah, it's quite bad. And now we are championing the right of everyone. My point is this: if there is space in the labor law or in the execution of the law that gives discrimination, regardless whether it's Malaysian, refugee, migrants, the industries which are so used to forced labor, human trafficking, will take advantage of this. And at the end of the day, it will be a race to the bottom for standards in general. So the question is, how are we going to build solidarity with your Malaysian counterparts, your trade union friends? How will you help them understand that we shouldn't discriminate? This is a challenge to you. And I was inspired by Kolat, who was able to sit with the trade unions and make these demands. And of course, then with the government agencies, and of course, among ourselves. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks so much, Adrian. I think I'm going to ask James to build on that. I think the point that you're coming across really strongly is finding those connections and solidarity among workers and the lessons that you yourself learned from refugee leaders who are really shaping your understanding of what it means to sort of demand refugee rights. Before James speaks really quickly, Adrian, if you could share, or maybe James too as a law student, just some of the significant cases that have been passed in the courts, that have come through the courts, that really uphold the rights of all workers to get their protection, including refugees.
So they have been cases, and of course, even though it's not in the law, when a court makes a judgment, it becomes case law. So don't feel that you cannot fight for your rights. Whether it's in the law, whether it's in the court, there are already international standards also that will defend and help you protect your rights. So there are cases, I think there's a few famous cases where the refugee who, after working, was denied his salary, his allowance. And the court said no, because the work is already done. The problem is the burden of proving that you work there will fall on you. So of course there are ways to overcome that. You need to log your work time, you need to take your own photos that you went to work. That burden naturally also falls on Malaysian workers. Nobody is free of that. And then of course, unfortunately by law, they use this very horrible term called pati. I don't like using the word illegal migrant or undocumented migrant. So the law says that you can't work. But in reality, after you do the work, regardless of your immigration status, you have a right to contest unpaid wages and to a certain degree damages. Yeah.
If I can just quickly jump on the last point that Adrian made, I think it's time we make some legal challenges now and push it in the court system and let the court make the decision. I mean, it can go both ways. So you need to strategize on how you deal with this though. Sometimes we can talk and talk, but nothing happens. But only when you challenge it, then the government takes it seriously, civil society takes it seriously, and if it works in your favor, and I see some recent cases involving migrant workers, has been quite good. It's been quite good. And I think this is something that has to be thought about though. But can I quickly respond to something that Lilian had just said earlier? I think the point that Lilian made is a very important one. I need to underscore that though. The government's mindset or the government's narrative is migrants and refugees come under the notion of law, order, and security. This is the mindset. So the government machinery is organized on that. So the police also behaves like that. Your immigration behaves on that. They're all threats. Not when I say security is a threat. You're a threat to Malaysia. This is the mindset that works. It needs to move from that to a development process, though. It needs to move to a development. That means refugees and migrants are perceived as development partners. I think this narrative has to move. Otherwise, the government structure is not going to change. The government is not going to think anything new ways of looking at it. So I think as part of the variety of narratives that we are trying to put forward, the development narrative is very, very important. And we have that narrative available to us through SDGs. Sustainable Development Goals is available to us together with forced labor. A lot of this is forced labor as well. So I think there are ways to be creative. So we need to be creative to push the agenda, push some luck, and I'm sure things can move though. Although sometimes it's going to be tough, but hey, come on. Why not?
Please, Heidi, go ahead.
Sorry.
But just to underscore really quickly, and so we're a couple of things, right? So I'm hearing the legal challenges that are creative. There is existing laws that have already affirmed rights of all workers, needing to learn and build solidarity, using other tools that we have, sustainable development goals, development narratives. James, will come to you in a second. Heidi, would you like to build on the points just made?
Sorry, just really quickly. I thought I'll just build on the first question, right? Around just how do we ensure that asylum seekers and refugees are not exploited in these areas. And I'm probably speaking from experience. So about a year ago, I also joined, I'm part of an ethical recruitment agency for migrant workers now called Pink Collar. A lot of our work focuses on studying the landscape to see how we could push for ethical recruitment across different business sectors. My area of focus is manufacturing, but over the past 3 months, I've spent about time meeting about 30 to 50 different stakeholders across different levels of playing field, business owners that are interested or have been interested in hiring migrant workers, right? And interestingly, it always circles back to what YB Charles just said, right? But a lot of times businesses sometimes might be more leaning towards hiring refugees simply because the cost of hiring migrant workers is often too high. SMEs hold 98% of all jobs in Malaysia, and SMEs often have extremely tight cash flows that limits them from hiring ethically or hiring right, and that's why a lot of times when you go to businesses outside, you see the posters for hiring refugees and migrants just pasted on their walls, right? And that's how most refugees and migrants get their jobs. So just a few comments, I think. One of the things I want to say is exploitation happens because there isn't a clear framework when hiring, for businesses when hiring refugees and migrant workers. When we spoke to businesses and SME associations, they often tell us that, we don't know how to even qualify for job orders in the first place. KDN, in a meeting a couple of weeks ago, mentioned that 70% of job orders, whenever businesses submit job orders to hire migrant workers properly through legal channels, 70% of these job orders were rejected simply because they don't qualify, right? And businesses don't know how do you even qualify to secure these job orders in the first place. So how do we ensure that there is a clear framework when hiring refugees? And then when it comes to just ensuring that refugees and asylum seekers don't get exploited, how do we even start by teaching refugees and asylum seekers their legal rights in the first place, right? And And I say this because we speak to so many business owners, right? When sometimes when sometimes asylum seekers and refugees need to borrow some money or ask for advance, they quickly, on their own initiative, go like, oh, these are migrant workers. They, on their own initiative, go like, oh, can I ask for an advance because my family back home has cancer, right? But you know, to ensure that I stay, I'm happy to hand you my passport. I'm happy to hand you my personal belongings, which is a violation of human rights, right? So how do we then teach refugees and migrants, you know, their legal rights in the first place, just so that they can speak up when exploitation happens? And then how do we then create a grievance mechanism for them to be reported? I say this because we now have a very strong established, when we work within the migrant workers field, there's a very strong established grievance mechanism. For example, when a domestic worker gets exploited and we don't handle the case well, our agency license stands a chance to be revoked, right? And how do we set up a similar mechanism in place, you know, to hold all parties accountable to responding to the grievance mechanism? It's not just a hotline to call, right? It's making sure that agencies and partners involved in a recruitment hiring stage acts on it and ensures that, you know, we tackle these grievances. Because lastly, I mean, I think, you know, if you're going to onboard refugees and asylum seekers into jobs, we need to get these businesses to sign an ethical recruitment pledge of sorts. We do that with our businesses now. We do that with our employers that hire from domestic work. And because they sign a pledge acknowledging that these are the rights that they need to, these are the laws that they need to follow by, they need to uphold rights of migrant workers. They can't revoke passports. They can't revoke handphones. They can't, you know, pay their salaries late. Workers have the right to off days. Because of all these measures, whenever they go against these laws, we can hold them accountable to this, right? So how do we set mechanisms in place to hold relevant parties accountable? So I just wanted to add on to that.
Thanks, Heidi. So you're also speaking about there is the law, but there's also the other structures where businesses, employers sort of operate under, and we're trying to figure out how to put pressure so that they, in their recruitment, in their employment, are protecting workers' rights. James, with MEO, I know one of the things that you said that we do is also assisting in employment disputes, addressing rights violations. If you could firstly just very quickly, for those who may not know, what are some of the patterns of exploitation you're seeing? And also, what is your analysis on where we need to be there's the law, there's what Heidi just talked about with the workers, with the employers. Where else do you see it's important for the changes and the pressure to be put in order to not just have the legislative framework for refugee protection, but to actually, for refugees to actually enjoy those rights as workers?
Well, because based on our experience as a community leaders, most of the exploitations that happen is not salary payments, because the employers will deny your payments and they will say, go and complain anybody, because, or the threat, I will send the police to your place. If you come to my place and ask the salary, I will report. I will send it to the police station or something kind of that. This kind of things always happen. So sometimes, as a community leaders, we are also like, you know, of course, like our people, they trust us that we can solve their problems. But that without like NGOs and like you know, AA and like Andrians, like, you know, these kind of people, you know, without them, we can't do this kind of thing. That's why, like, you know, we grabbed the local, like, you know, YB, and then everyone, whatever we have, like those, all of you are like our weapons for us to solve our problems, you know, like, so because, yeah, because we are the gods. But then this is very common, because like they will say, because even though, you know that, you know, they can't do anything. So most of the time they will come to us, or like some of the employer, they will say, no, come back to next month, come back to next month. But then if we look at the Malaysian's employment law, it said 7 days is the latest, the payment day they should make. But then many refugees employers, they are the victims of late payments, because some of them are not paid. They will say, come back next month, come back next month. But then, like, you know, but then some of our people, they are very faithful. But because, you know, their employer will say, because they don't know about this kind of legal things and everything, because, you know, they will trust them. Okay, my boss said he will pay me next month, he will pay me next month. But they keep trusting, they keep still working there. But later, since they have to feed their families, they come to us. So one of the things that I would like to ask, my suggestion to the NGOs and activists and everybody on this issue is, you know, also like, sometimes when we talk about the legal and the law issue, we need to be brave enough to create a precedent by ourselves, rather than based on the existence legal framework. Because if we look at, there are so many case law. Sometimes yes, the case happens because the law doesn't say refugee cannot work. So as long as they are employed, they become employer. They become employee. So they should titles under this law. So from us, we need to be brave enough to create our own precedents at the courts. If something happens, grab the case and put it to, as YB said, let the court decide. But then from our side, we have to be brave enough to bring the case and to become a precedent for the future to court. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. I really love that point about we need to be brave to create the thing that we want. And so this can be whether we're taking up a challenge in court, or we as employers or people who have the opportunities, as Malaysians especially, to create other opportunities and to sort of work in that solidarity. I'm going to turn to Suyan in a second, but Charles, I note the time on your end, and I wondered if you had any sort of final comments to make. And I just maybe nudging one thing in your direction, unless you don't have to leave. Oh, okay. Well, okay. We are optimistic. The point that James made is that people are, the unpaid wages is a huge thing. I know that you also have work on forced labor and modern day slavery. A challenge also is I wonder if some of the incentives to not protect refugee workers and undocumented workers is that there is this underpaid pool of workers that are there keeping the engine of our economy going with very poor wages. And so I'm throwing it to you. With your analysis and background working on anti-slavery work, how do we deal with this situation? What are the opportunities you're seeing? And also any other final closing remarks? Just from Charles, the others please stay.
Your question is a 2-day seminar.
Yes, you have 30 seconds.
I think oh my God, this is a lot. Let me organize it quickly though. While in trying to answer Katrina's question, let me preface something else though. While we are looking at the issue of wages, we're looking at the issue of jobs, job security, and so on, there's something more fundamental than that, which is healthcare, which is education, which is about welfare and food. I mean, these three things are our priority. And these are three things that really impacts the refugees, just like migrants and the poor in this country in a very big way. But poor in this country have support. The government has got some support, not be the best support in the world, but there is some support. But refugees do not have any support. I think this is where the engagement with government has to take place. Like for example, if you go to the hospitals today, if a refugee without a UNHCR card goes to a hospital today, government hospital, you have to pay first-class charges, which I think is nonsensical. It makes no sense, right? So maybe this is something that we should fight on, though. This government talks about being compassionate, Madani government. Let's engage. Let's engage and say, reduce it to a normal, your normal Malaysian paying charges, though. I think this is something that can work, right? Now, but let's also exercise international agreements where Malaysia is also a signatory, like SDGs, like forced labor issues, like other regional ASEAN ones are not binding, though. But SDGs is somewhat binding. Forced labor is also binding. And refugees very much can easily move into the narrative within forced labor, although it is focused on migrant workers and so on. But nothing is there to stop us from also getting refugees as part of that discussion as well. So I think this is where we have to be a bit creative, push the envelope a bit, push the agenda a bit, and see where it goes. And get other countries as well to work on these issues, though. Now, coming back to your difficult question, I think basically the initiative really must come, unfortunately, from the vulnerable communities themselves, from the refugees themselves. And I said earlier, we need to start this mapping, though. This mapping about our skill sets, what we have, what we don't have. And then a formal discussion, a formal dialogue and discussion with various authorities, though. I actually think there are lots of people in the local councils who are quite sympathetic to refugee issues, though. They understand it. they understand the problem, and therefore they are willing to help, except that instructions must come from the Home Ministry or from KPKT, which says, yes, you can give 10 slots or 10 permits to refugees. That is something we have to work on. That is a system that we have to work. So therefore, we need to expand the terrain of engagement, though. The terrain of engagement. Make government a point of contact, though, as a point of engagement. Right now, we are talking to NGOs, we are talking to parliaments and so on, but nothing like talking to the guys who actually make the decision, both in government as well as when I say government servants, as well as ministers and appointees like that. I think this is really quite important. I know from Klang, there's a big heart in the local council that wants to support refugees, but they just close their eyes. They just close their eyes. But there comes a point when a politician gets smart and says, hey, these guys are taking away our jobs, though. So that's when the problem starts. It's already started now, by the way. This hate speech has already started. And it's happening within our ranks. This is the disaster, though. It's happening within our own ranks, Pakatan Harapan. And this has to stop. This really has to stop. And therefore, I think this is a challenge going forward in a variety of ways. On that note, thank you very much. Thank you very much. My apologies, everybody. James, thanks for the invitation. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Let's thank Charles and then... Thank you so much, Charles. And just to round off that one point of when we think about government, it's not just government as in Prime Minister or Minister of Home Affairs, but government at every level, including the local councils. And maybe in some of the sharings, we can speak about how we've been engaging and building with changing this perspective and also putting pressure. So it's not just about convincing, but making it difficult for them to not do the thing they said they're going to do. So again, from UNHCR's side, if you could, you sort of sit in this position where you're not government, but sort of an international government in some way, and you have those interactions with community and government. Can you give us a sense of, firstly, from the, if you're able to speak to it, the pilot project in 2016, what were the key lessons that came from that as to why this is a pilot project? Maybe you can give a short overview. Why didn't it work?
Okay, so I think before I jump into the pilot project, just to build on what Charles mentioned as well, one of the ways that UNHCR is trying to advocate more for access to legal work for refugees is exactly the forced labor argument. Because forced labor is more of a priority to the government, to address, and probably, an easier inroads to getting that discussion on refugees up there. In fact, refugees are included in the country's national action plan for forced labor. We've actually included an indicator in there that says that one of the activities that should be carried out to work towards the eradication of forced labor is exactly as Thomas mentioned, the creation of a human-centric strategy to manage refugees and asylum seekers here. Moving backwards back to the work pilot that was in 2016. Now, I know it's been labeled very often as a failure, and there are many reasons why. So, and coming back to the whole meeting here today, the project wasn't done, I guess, in consultation with the community. So when you talk about having a project that targets a refugee or a refugee community, you don't ask them what they want. You don't ask them which skill sets they have, the work experience they have, and the sectors that they're interested in working with. Then you have a mismatch there. And it's not just a project that targets refugees. Any project where you don't match the beneficiaries with the aim of the project, it's not going to work out. So it's really as simple as that. We don't need to go into other characteristics as well. It's a project management issue. Another thing as well that we need to take into consideration. So firstly, of course, is the skills and experiences of refugees. And as Lillian mentioned, they are so diverse. But from UNHCR itself, we can see that a large number of refugees here have skills that are suitable to be integrated into sectors that migrant workers are already working in. So that's an opportunity. What we try and advocate for, and what the work pilot is an opposite to, I think, is access to legal work across all sectors. And this work pilot started off with the first phase of a plantation sector. Plantation in itself, whether it's refugee, migrant worker, is a difficult sector for employee retention. We all know that. So once again, it's not a refugee issue, but rather the nature of the work in itself, right? What is less spoken about is the second phase of the work pilot. So following the non-success of the plantation sector, there was a second phase in the manufacturing sector. This was cut short because of the pandemic as well. There were a lot of changes in immigration policies when it comes to issuance of work permits for anyone. And what we saw in the manufacturing space was more of a success, where we saw that Rohingya refugees who successfully managed to get through the process before the work pilot halted were extremely valued by the employers that were part of the work pilot. Some of them got promoted to team leaders, and are up till now still valued employer. Well, they're no longer employees there now, but the employer themselves have said that they have valued the contributions that the refugees have made throughout their time as part of the work pilot there. So I know we tend to focus on the the first phase, because the second phase really wasn't made, I guess, publicly. People aren't aware of it, but it shows that if you find a sector that works, it will work. And as we see now, you don't need it to be a pilot, because people are already working in these sectors, right?
I think, just firstly, was there any formal report that was put out about the pilot? No, okay. So this is not to UNHCR, this is actually a call to the government that we really do need that analysis and as to what went wrong, and so that we don't replicate the same issues. Secondly, I'll get to your first point on involvement really quickly, but also to what you have said is that people are already working, and I think there is sometimes a political motivation to say that the pilot failed because refugees don't want to work. And actually there was media reporting around this, and so we have to push back on that, this idea that we tried to give them an opportunity, they didn't want to take it. So a call to the government to release that analysis. Now to the first point about you have to speak to the community that you are working with before you design any kind of projects for them. I heard this at the start, nothing about us without us, which I think is a cry also from the disability justice groups, and somebody said it this afternoon. So maybe just first to Suyen, and then I'll turn to James. What are the opportunities right now for refugees to be involved in the advocacy and in the shaping of the livelihoods and refugee rights policies in Malaysia?
So I think, firstly, of course, forums like this makes it much easier. But from a UNHCR perspective, and I think James knows very well as well, we do have regular meetings with the communities, although probably we've not delved into livelihoods issues very often. There are a lot of other protection issues that come up that are of a more urgent priority, but right now, as you know, with the momentum that we have with the news, with the government making public statements, stating that they are working towards such a framework, now is when we, I guess, turn our existing engagement with the communities to look at livelihoods issues itself. One thing that we're doing as well, and going back to the need for data, that's where communities come in. Communities know their communities best. Communities know where their community members are to collect that data. It's a project that we have, UNHCR has ongoing, but we can't do that without the help of the communities. So it's two levels. You need, as much as you can get input from community leaders as representatives that summarize the voices of their community members, you also need quantitative data. There's nothing that can be done with the government if you don't have quantitative data. And we acknowledge that, we're not just asking for things without acknowledging the need to back that up with data. So that's where I think the work with communities come in.
I think just before that, I think it's also I'm going to speak from my perspective as somebody who's been working in this space for about 16 years. There are numerous reports on kind of like on refugee realities, refugee work rights, refugee, the kind of challenges people face, the recommendations made. So I appreciate absolutely the point for data and analysis, but I also don't want people who are listening to think that this is the starting point when there is a long history, decades worth of work that is still relevant today. So to James, what, as a representative from the community, as a leader, as somebody who does advocacy, what would you like to see from UNHCR, from NGOs, from MPs, from government, who are shaping refugee work rights policies? How would you like refugee communities to be involved?
Well, that is a huge, of course we want everything. But then, yeah, of course, like for the moment, what we need, as Charles or YB said, mapping is very important. But then the issue is the mapping. The question is who has to start the mapping. So this way we need to ask the questions, because does NGO have to do it or UNHCR has to do it? So we have to, because the good point is, no, because, like, this is not on the community, actually, because, the community are diverse, and then, the people who come to us may be different. But then UNHCR has all of them. So, even like for me, I go to UNHCR from my cards. When they ask me about my information, they will never ask me about my education. So this is still missing. So they need to, because this mapping is the mapping about the skill. And the UNHCR has the right position to do this mapping. And then any refugees coming to UNHCR, they should collect and ask them their education backgrounds. And then what they are doing, what they are studying. And then only then, like, after that, whatever they have the skills, data, they have to do promotions. Because, like, now we don't see, refugees skills, promotions. Nobody's doing this. We said mapping. We just say refugees are refugees skillful, but then there's no promotions. We don't see anyone promoting refugees. Where there's any contesting? No, because so this kind of thing should done. Firstly, UNHCR, they have to lead this by working with the NGOs and also the community leaders, because they should do some kind of the child contesting, or maybe asking okay, if the government asks the UNHCR, okay, you said refugees are skillful, show me. What are you going to give them? So even I'm a law student, I go to UNHCR, they never ask me my education background. They just ask me, okay, you're coming for what? So I just done. So I think UNHCR should start doing this mapping from the skill. And then after that, NGO have to also help promoting for this skill to, and then even only then, we can ask the government to come up with the programs skill-based program, not only just limited at the sector, because the government think UNHCR should work in the plantation. It's kind of like, the child, you give the child foods that he doesn't want to eat. And then you said he refused the food, of course. You said, oh, I give him the food, but he doesn't want to eat. It's the same thing. Yeah, thank you.
So I think what I'm hearing you say clearly is that there are already existing structures. Now we just need to be adding and using those and structures. So for example, with UNHCR's infrastructure, that can be part of the mapping. I think also some of the challenges also for refugee leaders to be doing this work. Then the assumption that folks can do it with what they have. I think people are operating under very little resources and under huge security threats. And so it needs to be a real partnership. I know, Lillian, you wanted to add on to that?
Thanks, Kat. Just on a couple of things. Number one, I think to revisit this issue of the plantations and the so-called failure of that pilot project. It was a failure in many ways, but I don't think it was just because of the sector, because we have seen, in our work with the Rohingya community, a lot of Rohingya actually happily working in plantations. The issue is that, I'm just taking one example, in Johor. We were doing food distributions across the state, And there was one community in Merseng, all the way, on the east of Johor. At least 80 families are working in plantations. But what kinds of plantations are these? These are not the very large-scale plantations. These are much smaller, medium-sized plantations that are much more flexible and allow refugees to have their families living with them. So this is one of the key issues, right? I think it's not just about which sector, it's about understanding that most refugees are here with their families, because refugees come here not just as a single person coming to seek a job. This is I think, one of the biggest differences with migrant workers. Not to say that migrant workers don't have families, many of them do, but most refugees really do come here with at least part of their family, or they come here to join family members, and they really do not want to be separated again from those family members. I think this is one of the key things to understand when we are trying to facilitate work for refugees. You need to understand that family separation is really not something that should be, that any refugee will accept. So it's much less about which sector, even the skill set, that can be trained. It's a lot more about Rohingya who were put into that pilot project didn't understand that they were supposed to be away from their families. After a few days, they decided to stop, not because, the job was too hard. It's actually because we can't bring our family. We can't bring, the women and the children into this space. Who is going to protect them, right? So it's protection concerns as well. That's number one. The second thing is, on this mapping, happy to say that there are some initiatives already, James, and one of them we're involved in, which we will be engaging HCR and a lot of other actors. So I don't think it's just about asking HCR to do everything. It's really about working in partnership. And so many of us, I think now, there's a real circle, right, of organizations, whether it's from NGOs, whether it's, trade unions. Really engaging on, these groups that Adrian works with on a daily basis, and Heidi as well with her work. I think it's really bringing together, these various stakeholders, right, and trying to set up a kind of a system where one can do kind of more objective mapping, getting research institutes involved, right? So it's not just about, like an NGO looking about their program, but it's really actually about finding out the landscape. And any mapping that is ever done will never be constantly up to date unless it's a live database, right, or something live. So, you'll constantly need to be working to piece together the picture, the larger picture, and have these ongoing mappings. But besides that, it's also really about, ensuring that, number one, there are skills that exist, right, with refugee communities, but also there are communities who have never had the chance to work and have never had the chance to be educated. And speaking, in this case, for the Myanmar community, mainly the Rohingya community that, isn't even recognized as citizens in Myanmar and have been denied that access to education, have been denied the right to work even in Myanmar. So it's not just about what skills you have already, it's about what opportunities you can provide and what people are willing to learn. How do you provide that training? How do you give people opportunities? Even here, I'm sure so many of you, maybe you have skills to work in a certain sector, but you really would love to work in something else. You really want photography skills, or you really want, digital skills, or you really want different kinds of skills. You should be able to have those opportunities. So it's about that as well, right? Mapping, what the skills are, but also mapping what people want, what kind of learning people want, and what kind of upward mobility people are interested in.
Just a time check. I know we've gone a little over officially, but James said we could be here until 5:30 on this panel, so just a few more minutes. I've got two broader questions for the panel, and one of it is building on what Lilian said about we have to understand that people come with families, and they come with their networks and loved ones, and so it's not just, refugee is not just one thing, refugee complex, person complex. We all have our needs, right? I think within that, I want to ask about refugee women and refugee youth. I recognize there isn't a refugee woman on the panel, and I'm really, but just from Heidi, if you want to start, and also from the youth, because you work with refugee youth, where do you see and what needs to be done to meaningfully involve refugee women and refugee youth, separate points, not the same, into this creation and development of a refugee work plan, refugee work rights agenda. So not just let's talk to them, but meaningful engagement. And what are some of the barriers?
Yeah, I think this is particularly interesting, right? I mean, when it comes, when we're circling back to just consulting the community, now there's a term for it, and it's called accountability to affected populations, right? How do we be accountable to affected populations and consult them in the process? And when it comes to women and children, women and youth, I think a lot of it is just understanding the complexities when women go out into the workforce, right? It's first looking into just working in plantations. It's not the lack of appeal, it is weighing out how much am I earning and how much is daycare. You know, it doesn't make sense if I'm earning 1,200, 1,500 and daycare is 400-500 ringgit and I'm covering rental, right? So how do we even understand the complexities and what keep women away from the workforce in the very beginning? Daycare is one of it. Daycare is a big issue, right? A lot of times when I meet with refugee women, we actually have a sewing program at Refuge to Refugees who are working with women to sew. Actually gave Suyen, you know, one of the tops that the women have been making, you know, and what we've been working around is also making sure that they don't have to turn up at a center every day to sew. How do we get them trained and bring them home, get them to go home with sewing machines so that they can sew at home, and we reconvene once a week to look through our pieces and strategize on the next steps, right? It's looking into details of what is important for them and what makes sense in their current circumstances. Looking to transport, you know, it's realizing that our public transportation is not integrated at all, you know. From Kajang to Pudu, it takes 1.5 hours by public transport, and you're losing and shaving off so many hours a day just because you can't drive and you're not afforded a driving license. So before we even think about, you know, integrating refugee women and youth into the workforce plan, it's thinking about access to transport, negotiating with employers, that you know, access to transport, you know, pickup is really important, but also making sure that, you know, daycare services can be provided on one way or another. You know, if it's not daycare, how do we find school that's nearby for them? When we look into these considerations that are keeping youth and women away from the workforce, that is key before we design how do we integrate them into the workforce in the very first place.
Suyen, do you want to build on that answer about really working closely with refugee women to articulate their vision for what work rights looks like?
So recently we did a survey on financial behaviors of refugees, and it's a small sample, but large enough to be representative or so. So when we asked refugees whether they were employed, unemployed, or out of the workforce, you can see the disparity there, because men are employed, high, but then for women, they're not unemployed, meaning to say the definition of unemployment is that they don't have a job now, but if you offer them an opportunity, they are able to take it on. They are part of the out of the workforce category, meaning to say that even if you gave them a job, they won't be able to take that on. So it builds back to what Heidi's talking about, whether support systems are there for women to enter the workforce, right? And I think maybe that's where communities come in again. I know it's easier said than done, but you know, childcare is always a major issue. Another thing that we need to talk about is the cultural issues that come up, because traditionally maybe women aren't familiar with entering the workforce. And even another thing that I saw recently from the ADSP report, which focuses on the Rohingya, but maybe could be extended to other communities as well, is that back in their home countries, they used to work for subsistence, meaning to say they weren't employed. They weren't working for an employer, getting a salary. They're working is, what they do is, I go out, I go to my farm, I get my food from my farm. It's subsistence, just for them to make do with whatever it is they need. It's not what we are familiar with. So sometimes we need to take a look at ourselves and challenge that perspective, right? Because we think, oh, why don't they want to work? But we don't think about, they were not raised in, they are not brought up in this, a similar culture such as us, where we're like, okay, I go to school, I come out, I need to go and enter the workforce, right? It's not something that's familiar to them. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I think part of that is for us to understand that work means many things. And this is, a much bigger conversation about valuing housework, about valuing how challenging farming work is, subsistence work. And so I think as we're talking about other things we need to discuss, maybe, like Charles said, a 2-day panel on discussion on slavery, but also on gender and youth and women workers in refugee communities. So we're going to wrap up. I'm going to ask everybody to share their final thoughts, but I also want them to answer this one question. So we cannot talk about, as you know, work rights in isolation. There's security issues, there's gender, there's arrest and detention, and also increasingly a lot of racism, xenophobia, hate speech. And so I want a reflection when we speak about really working together, maybe a call to Malaysians, both Malaysian public and also elected leaders. What needs to be done to really shift the cultural norms and attitudes towards refugees, to really respect people's dignity and lives, and how do you see that as a necessary connection also to work rights? So if you could answer that, shifting our ways of thinking. Just one thing. I'm not asking you to complete this full thesis, just one thought. And also any final comments for the floor. Maybe we'll start with Adrian, who has the mic.
Yeah, so everyone, there was a time when borders were not taken as seriously as a security matter. People were a bit more flexible to come in and out. But after the post-colonial era, people said, hey, this is my country, I am the citizen, this is my passport. But don't forget, we are also global citizens. We are part of a bigger family, we are part of a bigger border that, we all should collaborate, work in solidarity, and also build on a worldview that is based on human rights. So it's not just me, my nationality is important, or my race, but taking care of everyone as a global family. Thanks.
We're going to go to Lillian, and we're going to end with James as also part of the convener.
All right. What a difficult question, Kat. I mean, giving us like 1 minute to respond to answer all these questions. I would just say, I think, from working on this issue of xenophobia and trying to build social cohesion at the local level, which is very challenging in some ways, but also, I think, not as difficult as we think it is. I think that one thing we really need to do is to really keep engaging local level communities, local authorities. When I'm talking about local communities, I don't just mean our local friends, and I think in one of the presentations earlier, MEO's strategy was engaging progressive NGOs. That's great to engage progressive NGOs, but you need to move beyond that. You need to engage people who don't agree with you. You need to be engaging the people who are criticizing you. And I think, we can maybe help you to bridge that, because of course it's quite scary, and it maybe shouldn't be the refugees directly, but definitely those of us working with refugees, we have to start having those conversations, because actually when you really talk to others who have, fear or some opposition or some criticism of refugees, if you really listen to them as well, actually a lot of their fears are not quite as xenophobic and bad as we think they are. Sometimes they really get overblown in the media. There are certain individuals who are using terrible hate speech, which has to be absolutely condemned and action has to be taken. But the vast majority of local communities who have misperceptions about refugees actually just don't know enough about refugees and have their own insecurities, because everyone is struggling in some way, and I think this is important for refugees to understand. Sometimes when you hear that hatred or that discrimination, it's not because they really hate you or there's really anger towards you. It's also because a lot of local communities are vulnerable. A lot of local communities are insecure. We're in a context where there's a lot of insecurity, economically and everything. And sometimes there's just not enough awareness about how we can really be working together. So I would say we need to move in that direction where we're really taking the time to listen to each other a lot more and understand what those concerns are and find ways of coming to really discuss them and find solutions together.
Suyin?
She stole my thought, so no, I'm just. But it's true. I think the key issue here is people are quick to fear. People are quick to be afraid. People are, and everyone wants to point a finger because you sometimes when you're afraid, like when you hear something in the middle of the night, there's a bump. You need to find a reason why. You need to blame something for it. Oh, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the water heater. Maybe it's the furniture. Maybe it's the what, right? Because you fear the unknown. So exactly as what Lillian says, we need to, I think as a community here, we need to stop preaching to the choir. We know who our allies are, and our allies know what we want them to know already. So we need to move beyond that. We need to understand the target audience beyond our allies. And with that, I think the key thing that I've learned working in UNHCR for 7 years, it's a long time, but is when I talk to people, when I meet them, I imagine what if that was me, you know? And what if someone is coming to me to ask me for these things because they don't have a choice? And if you make that emotional connection, I think emotional connection is one of the strongest things that you can foster, and it's something that stays beyond the facts, beyond the whatever news and stuff like that. It's emotion. So that's probably something that we should try and work on more.
I really like the points that have been brought up, and I'm about to say that, you know, we have been exploring this, you know, how do we build more social cohesion, right? How do we build more relationships in that sense? I truly believe that in order, I think one of the reasons why, you know, all these discussions don't quite take off is because we come to the table with so much hostility, right? Pointing fingers and expecting different parties to be the main people involved in shifting policies. But realistically, it takes all of us to work hand in hand together, no one more than the other. Yes, everyone has different role in a stakeholder engagement. And over the past year, we have been working on a program called Dari Dapur, where we've been going into refugee and migrant communities, filming them cooking dishes that represents home. I think I saw one of our chefs here just now, James Lasang. I'm not sure if he's still here, but he was featured in one of our episodes, you know. And what was really cool about doing this, right, is that we worked hand in hand with chefs, featuring dishes that represents home. Don't you agree that the one thing that unites a Malaysian is food, right? I mean, we bond over food. And with each of these conversations, we invited a local stakeholder to the table. You know, we had people like Nurul Izzah on, we had people like Chef Wan on, we had people like Lisa Surihani on. And in these conversations, we explored topics of migration, trying to build on that emotional connection and just that similarities that we have amongst all of us, right? Regardless whether we are refugee, whether we are migrant, whether we are Malaysian, whether we're not a Malaysian. We had Brian McPheeters, the US ambassador to Malaysia, on as well. And a lot of it was realizing that actually, despite our differences, we have so much more commonality than we understand. And I think when we come to the table and notice that commonality that we all have, that's where we are able to better advocate for each other and not see us as people that are against one another. So I really believe that before we go to the table of policy making and stuff, we need to first have a meal and realize that, you know, we are one and the same, right? Because when we come to that realization, that's where we are better positioned to advocate for one another and to put ourselves in each other's shoes. Yeah.
That is really amazing. There's a words of mother. And yeah, so well, for me, like, it's a bit hard to because like we've been trying to eliminate these discriminations against refugees and asylum seekers and illegal migrants, but that is a bit hard. But then, of course, we are here under the topics of talk together, act together. So we're going to work together in the future. But then, like, you know, as we all know that when we talk about refugees and asylum seekers, like, you know, all the locals and the other people, they will think, oh, we are like maybe criminals or maybe like, you know, crossing the borders because like kind of that. So because they don't know the motive of coming to Malaysia. So they just see us here and like their misperception is that refugees and asylum seekers, they are not educated. So it's very important also, like as I mentioned, earlier I said that, you know, like we have to, we need some platform to promote and the skills of refugees. Because like in this 21st century, in my opinions, everybody's treated based on skill. So if you think like refugees are not skillful, the way they treat us is different. Yeah. And then like at the same time, even like from the government parts also like, they should open up more, they should relax. I mean like for example, work discriminations. At the last, I brought some of my community people to find jobs. I call, and then I call them like they say, oh, where are you from? Then I said, from Myanmar. Oh, sorry, no foreigner. We want only local. But then I still see the post of hiring. How long are they going to put the hiring? Just get the refugee. Like, but then they're still waiting for the local people to apply the job, but then they never apply the job. That's why the signboard is, the post over there. That's I won again, and they said, no, we told you we need a local. But then why still here? Just grab lah, right? And so this kind of things happen. That's why sometimes it's very hard, but then I don't know, but then we need some kind of platform to promote this issue. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. There's so much here to take away, but I just want to give my thanks. I think there's a lot of work, there's a lot of insight, there's a lot of building of solidarity, figuring out how we reach and work with people who we don't agree with, who don't maybe like us, but there's also needing to think about people and to keep telling the stories of how refugees are here, they are working, they are artists, they are resource people, they are skilled, they are and say maybe on that very dramatic ending that we can end here, but there's a lot of work to be done. Please take the time, speak to the panelists. Thank you so much for your attention. And I see some drinks at the back, so maybe I'll hand it to the MCs. And as Heidi said, we need to sit at the table of food, so let's do that now. Thank you all so much.
Before we go, can the panelists, we will be holding a Q&A session.
Is there time?
Oh, yes. It's okay. It's okay. All right.
Sorry. You can tell them that, after this, they can ask us any questions after we just tell them.
Ladies and gentlemen မှာမေးခွန်းများရှိရင်ပေါ့မေးခွန်းလေးများကိုခဏကြိုက်ဆရာတွေကိုကြိုက်တဲ့ဆရာကိုမေးလို့ရပါတယ်เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျေးဇူးပါ Now, for our closing prayer, we would like to warmly welcome Reverend. What's this? All right. Sorry for that. Now, we'd like to say again. So, for our closing prayer, we would like to warmly welcome Reverend Ginto Kup from ZCF Kota Damansara for closing prayer. Reverend Ginto Kup.
Tongan nanay ni mo, tupalong damong tuni ng mahappy na tanuam tagina. Tugen nate, tukikum nate, panlazang top dong nong zopihi. Akigen hiya kisaki lachem, patupa kaminam sungwa, kotia din tupay sagin la, ongpay. Ofisate zongin Tunisia semate tupang piak sagin no happy na telungdam ko Jesu na mento apin tukungan to pakosiano. Amen.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the event. Before we let you go, our chairman would like to say a few words.
Okay, I just stand. It's okay. I just stand here. Okay, and I would like to say there will be some. Okay, so sorry. There will be some refreshment, and you can take also. And then those who want to stay still here, you can still stay here and ask some question to our guests, our panelists, speakers. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, very good morning, not a very good evening to all. It's giving me immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for this event to all dignitaries assembled here. We would like to thank our chief guest Thomas Albert, our panelist speaker YB Charles, Santiago, Adrian Pereira, Lillian Fan, Heidi, and Su Yente, and our moderator Katrina, who honored this function with their inspirational thoughts. We would like to thank also our NGOs, partners, and all who are coming here, Red Crescent and others who are coming here as well. Yeah, thank you very much. And then for our and also our participants, volunteers, and then for this place, the CF Kota Damansara, and then with also ZKDA, and last not but the least, our beloved audience for making this function as a grand success. As our titles is talk together, act together, create a community-based strategy for refugee work rights. Once again, I thanks every one of you to present here. Thank you. Okay.